Hello, and welcome to a special edition of the Congressional Report. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television, and it's been our privilege over the last few years to get regular updates from our congressman for this area, Congressman Vern Buchanan. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us again, and we really appreciate you taking the time to kind of update this community on many of the things that face your constituents.
Yeah. Charles, thank you for the opportunity to do such a great job for Manatee and Sarasota County. I've got two counties I represent, and you cover both of them.
Well, your involvement in kind of updating your constituents is really invaluable. So let's start off, Congressman, with an issue I know that's very near and dear to you because of your interest in veterans and the many veterans that are in your district. You're a former member of the House Committee on Veterans Affairs, and you're a strong, very strong advocate for all of the veterans in the 16th. But what are your thoughts about the most recent disclosures regarding the Veterans Administration, and how is this process going to get fixed?
Well, as you mentioned, I represent in these two counties almost 90,000 veterans.
Exactly.
I can't think of anything more disturbing than the fact that we've got many facilities around the country and we've got these waiting lists. Now, the waiting list, as you mentioned, I was on it for 3 or 4 years myself on the VA. Has been an issue, but we always thought it was getting better. I haven't served in the last year and a half, but the Secretary has said that his top priority is shorting these waiting lists, right. But yet we haven't done a very good job. Now we find out there's 2 sets of lists, like in business, 2 sets of books. It's very disturbing, but I can tell you we're going to do everything we can to address it. I co-chair the Florida delegation, and one of the things we're going to do, we've got a special meeting coming up, I think next week or the following week with our delegation. We're going to look into it and do everything we can to get it fixed and get it fixed now. Of course, the Secretary resigning, I think is a step, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. I think the whole process, unfortunately, is flawed. But we have promised our veterans quality health care,
exactly.
And we're going to deliver on that promise.
Well, I think because of your vast support for veterans throughout your time in Congress and even before then, is really indicative of the voice that veterans have through you for better care and prompt care. And I think you mentioned the fact that there's been a lot of inconsistencies in the VA care. There's doctored books that said that the waiting time was less than what it actually was, and it really resulted in poor care. In this area, Manatee and Sarasota County, you're very fortunate that that Veteran Services does so much for the veterans in your area.
Yeah, I'm still concerned because a lot of them go to Pinellas County for services, and there's some concern they could have a problem as well. But we need to address it. It's a national, frankly, disgrace. We have 20-some million veterans, 2 million in Florida. We made a promise to our veterans about quality, timely health care. We need to deliver on that promise. There's no reason we shouldn't. I think the whole thing needs to be reformed, and that's what I'm going to move aggressively in that direction and take care of our veterans.
Well, the last program that you did on METV, you had quite a few veterans and talked about the opportunity and the educational benefits that were available. It was a great program, and people were most appreciative of your interest in veteran benefits.
Well, again, we've made a lot of progress. I don't want to say it's all negative. We built the new VA clinic here. Right. Down the street here in Manatee County, 20,000 plus square footage, so people don't have to go to Pinellas for everything. So we've made good progress. The National Veteran Cemetery, I was out there the other day. My
Beautiful.
Parents are both buried there. We had moved them over there, but gorgeous. They're building a gigantic amphitheater there. Yeah. That's going to be incredible, one of a kind in the country. So there's a lot of good things going on with the VA, but this is an area that's disturbing, and we're going to fix it.
Well, Congressman, let's just kind of take that same issue about and talk a little bit more about foreign policy. Now, you recently returned from Afghanistan, and I believe you said this was your fourth trip there, your fourth visit to Afghanistan to see the troops, which is, again, you're to be commended upon that. It's an arduous trip, to say the least. But the president recently announced a plan to leave about 10,000 troops in the country about after 2014, with that force being drawn down to fewer than 1,000 by 2017. First of all, I want to hear more about your trip and also your thoughts on the president's plan.
Well, we get an opportunity. We put these kids in harm's way. I think it's my obligation as a member of Congress to go look and make sure what they say is actually happening. So again, it's been my fourth trip. Usually what happens, we get there, we get a briefing from the top general and the ambassador, both of them. The mindset, we're in transition. We're hopefully going to do a much better job than we left Iraq from that standpoint. We did have 100 to 130,000 men and women on the ground. We're at 30. Ideally, the president mentioned 9,800 by the end of the year, and then within a year or two, maybe down to 1,000, some basic embassy security forces. So that's where that's at. The thing that I primarily do it, and my biggest motivation is to make sure we're moving in that direction. But the other thing, we have a lot of young men and women that serve from this area and all over Florida and the country. I want to make sure that their attitudes are good and they feel good about what's going on, and we're doing everything we can to support them when they're in harm's way. And I got to tell you, I met with a lot of, just 2 weeks ago, met with a lot of our young men and women from Florida, and they're very professional, great attitude. They said, look, we didn't get drafted, we signed up for this, and I just can't believe the professionalism. I'm very proud of the young men and women that are serving there on behalf of a grateful nation.
Well, you've got to be really excited to have a chance to meet, men and women that are serving their country, and get a chance to shake their hand and, just say, hey, I'm your congressman from the great state of Florida. It's got to be exciting for you to have a chance to meet them.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we're doing all the right things. And then I encourage, I went into service at 18. I'm a blue-collar, grew up in a blue-collar family. I want to encourage them that they take advantage of the GI Bill, something they're earning. And we've improved that. I've been a part of that process of improving that. So kids that do serve in the service, make that kind of commitment, put everything on the line many times. I want to make sure they realize there's probably about $10,000 a year on average that they accumulate that they can use towards getting a college education, which I think is a ticket to get into the race.
And I think it's really important because, they earn those benefits, and, making sure that they know and take advantage of that is really instrumental. Now, Congressman, I want to take a couple of minutes, if I may, to talk about an issue that, is in the papers and very timely. And then you just recently wrote a letter to Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, questioning him on his decision on the release of detainees from Guantanamo in return for an American prisoner. And it's raised a lot of concerns because the people that were released are considered to be, top or were considered top echelon of the Taliban. What are your concerns about this, and why do you want to know more information?
Well, one, it's not been our policy. Two is it's against the law. They don't have the right to do that without working with Congress. I think there needs to be a 30-day notice. Three is, as you mentioned, they're some of the baddest of the bad, the terrorists that have done harm and will do harm again. To release 5 of them makes absolutely no sense. So that's why I'm concerned about the administration, what they're doing, but I wrote a letter to the Secretary of Defense, and I laid out 3 or 4 questions, and hopefully anybody that's on our website, they'll get a copy of the letter I wrote the Secretary, and then go to buchanan.house.gov to get that. But I wanted him to address some questions. To me, it's very disturbing in this direction. Again, it's not something we've had a history of doing, but when you talk about taking terrorists, these guys from Gitmo, there's a reason why they're in Gitmo. These are people that can do major harm to the U.S. and the safety of the American people. So I'm very concerned about it, and as soon as I get back the response, I'll be glad to share it with you and your listeners.
Well, and I think that's an important facet to bring back, because I think that the issue has raised a lot of concerns, throughout the country, whether this is going to be in a policy or whether this is a one-time type of thing, and what are the circumstances surrounding the arrangements that were made. So we'd welcome you back to talk about that.
And I'll just say there's a lot of people, members of Congress, very unhappy with this decision. I'll be back in Washington next week, and there'll be a lot of discussion and debate about. Like I said earlier, under the law, he doesn't have the right to do what he did. So that's something from an administration standpoint that we're going to look at clearly. So we'll see. Stay tuned.
Well, Congressman, if I may, I'd like to, talk a little bit about things that are a little closer to home. And you were instrumental Congress was instrumental in passing a farm bill that provides over $125 million to study citrus disease, including citrus greening, which could have a severe impact on Florida and Florida's agriculture. Why is that needed, and how will it help local growers, specifically the largest in this area, Tropicana, because that's a serious issue for this community? Well,
when you think of Florida, you think of orange juice, and citrus greening is one of the key diseases right now.
Correct.
They're losing, in many cases, half of their crop, half of their trees. When you think about Tropicana and how many people they employ, it's something that, in talking to a lot of growers in Manatee and Sarasota County and other parts of the state, it's very real. So we're trying to do everything we can, make sure they got the resources so that we can deal with this citrus greening. It's out of control. So we got $125 million with the idea we can get another $125 million. It was my bill. I helped lead that effort, and I was very happy to see that all Republicans and Democrats voted for it as well. So I think it makes a big difference, but again, we've got to make sure that we keep our crops healthy, and at the end of the day, it's about jobs and economic activity, especially here in Manatee County.
Well, I think a lot of the money is going to go research and to University of Florida to research this and to find out ways how to prevent and slow and stop this citrus greening, which can have devastating effects here in Florida.
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of local growers, Mixon Farms, who and people. It is a big time devastation, and we're trying to make sure we get those dollars out quickly. And again, a lot of people, when we look at our economic vitality in Florida, 20 million people. One of the big aspects of who we are and what we do is citrus and agriculture.
Absolutely.
And we've got to make sure that stays strong long term. So it's a small investment compared to the number of jobs, hundreds of thousands of jobs that they create in that segment of our economy.
Well, just as important as agriculture for the state of Florida is tourism, and nothing says tourism better than beaches. And you were recently involved at the federal level in the Anna Maria Beach renourishment that just recently concluded. Tell us about your involvement in that, and why is that important for this community?
Well, they claim, I'll just say this, for every dollar invested in beach renourishment, we get $40 in return. But Anna Maria is one of the, and I'm just going by what people say, and I've always known this, one of the top islands in the country.
It is.
And when you look at that, it's about sunsets, but it's all about fabulous beaches. And it was a partnership between the county, the state, and ourselves, $18 million that we invested back in these beaches. It helps for storms, it helps for economic activity, property values, small businesses, jobs. So it's a big opportunity for us to make that investment. On the other hand, if I had a chance to be out there last week and just looked at it, we had completed the project.
Right.
It is unbelievably gorgeous, those beaches out there. I mean, a lot of the beaches were up to the road.
That's true.
And you can't imagine having no beaches or not much of a beach. And now you could look like 2 or 3 football fields, beautiful, pristine white sands. So it's unbelievable, and I'd ask your listeners to go out and look at it, because it is their tax money, but we try to be prudent about it, But we thought this is the right investment, and part of it is we got hit by 2 big storms, Sandy and Debbie, I think it was, and it was devastating, primarily to Anna Maria Island. So I did what I could on the federal side. We got $9 million, and then the state and the county matched the other $9 million. I think roughly those are the numbers. But it's really an incredible job that's been done, and I just encourage your viewers to get out there. It's an unbelievable investment, and it's just the right thing, I think, for the citizens of Manatee County.
And it's a good return on the investment too, because as you mentioned, the tourism dollars increase, small business increases. So the investment is showing sound returns. As you mentioned earlier, agriculture.
And let me just say one thing, Charlie. I had one person that was there was telling me that they had a little house right across from the beach, $80,000 because there was no beach. They put the beach up, and she got $160,000.
Well, there you go.
So it just, in terms of the real estate value, that was one of the stories that they told me last week when I was there. And so it just drives values and drives tourism, sales tax dollars, and more dollars into the county.
Well, tourism has increased throughout the state of Florida, and I think they set records in Anna Maria and the beaches this year, and they'll continue to do that as long as they have a vibrant beach to come to. As you mentioned, both agriculture and tourism are vital for Florida's economy, and the economy overall, I think it's fair to say, seems to be improving. Are you feeling optimistic about that, and what do you see for the future as the economy continues to improve?
We're not there yet, but we've come a long way. We had 12% unemployment. Today, I think it's 5.7, 5.6 in Manatee County. Sarasota County's maybe 5.8 or something like that. Yeah, I'm very bullish, I think, simply because of the demographics, the baby boomers. I think everything from Anna Maria, or let's say Manatee County, down to probably Naples is probably going to do as well as anywhere in the country. Because when we look at these economic statistics that we get, it's nationally. But in our area, I think we're doing a lot better. There's more that needs to be done. We need to support everything we can, better policies to help small businesses in terms of tort reform and tax reform. There's a lot of other things that we can do, driving down the cost of insurance. But we need to, the end goal, we need to get everybody that wants a good paying job, we got to make sure they can get a job. And we're moving closer to that, I'd say within the next year. There wasn't too long ago where you couldn't find anybody you could hire. We were down at 3.5%. That's basically full employment, and that's our goal.
Well, and I think, you know, the governor has been making some great strides to attract business to the state of Florida as well. I think there's this competition that the governor has with Governor Perry from Texas to see which can attract the most industry. But there seems to be indicators that, you know, home starts are improving, and there's some work to be done.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, the governor, you see him in the headlines. But don't forget about the Manatee Chamber, the economic development arm in Manatee County and Sarasota County, both of these counties. They're busy getting more people to come. But the other side of the coin is that people come here, the way it happens. I was one of those guys. In 1979, I had a friend invite me to Anna Maria Island. And we came 3 years in a row. Then we bought a 2-bedroom condo. So that's how I got here. That's the way a lot of people get here. They come here, they fall in love with Anna Maria Island or the islands or Bradenton, and then after 3 or 4 years they find to retire. And with the baby boomers coming along, there's not a better place, I think, personally, in the country than what we have right here. We've got pristine beaches, we got the gorgeous sunsets, it's not overcrowded, and I think just property values long term are going to be good. So I'm very, very bullish. And my wife and I always joke that we could probably live where we want to live, but I think we're living in paradise right here, the best place in the country.
And it really is. I think when people complain about traffic, I think they should go to other locations and, you know, not only throughout the state, but throughout the country and say, well, here's bad traffic. Manatee County manages that very, very well.
Yeah, come to Washington. You can see the traffic. There's too much traffic. We need a smaller government in Washington.
Well, there you go.
But you can see, you know, you go 4 miles and it takes you a half hour.
And because of the density of this, but Manatee County has certainly a lot to offer. What do you look forward to, Congressman, as you look in seeing how you can, kind of help stimulate those economy? Are you looking for, some changes in regulations, some, changes in opportunities or incentives for small businesses? What are those kind of key factors that you wanted to see kind of help stimulate the economy?
Well, again, I touched base on it. I think the key at the end of the day and who we are is mainly small businesses. If you look at the Manatee Chamber or the
Right.
Anna Maria Island Chamber, any of these chambers, most of them are 20, 25 employees or less. The more we can do to help them in terms of tax reform, making it flatter, simpler, fair, tort reform, less frivolous lawsuits, regulation, we have way too many regulations. A lot of this needs to be looked at and reduce the regulation and the burden on small businesses. So anything we can do to help them be more successful, make sure they got access in terms of the SBA if they're looking to start a business, because we want to encourage more startups. And I'll mention the other day I did a little forum with women, and there was 10 entrepreneurs, mainly from Manatee County, a few from Sarasota, women that were running businesses. And they said in the next 10 years, 58% of all the new business startups are going to be females. So, we need to create a better environment for startups and entrepreneurship, because at the end of the day, when you look at Apple Computer, he started in his garage,
Right.
and then he created hundreds of thousands of jobs. And that's what we've got to do, is encourage more startups, and I think that lifts the whole economy in our region and across the country.
I know, as a strong advocate for small businesses, you're always there to provide advice or guidance, or or listening to people's concerns throughout the community. If we can, Congressman, I'd like to change gears for a moment and talk a little bit about health care. Recently, you co-sponsored legislation to reform the nation's broken mental health system. Tell us about the Helping Families in Mental Health Crisis Act and why that was important to you.
Well, 1 in 4 people each year are affected by some mental disorder. And we spent $125 billion, and the mindset is that we haven't spent it very well. But it's not just a mindset, it's what people have looked at and done studies on. We're not talking about spending more money, we're talking about taking $125 billion and make it work more for the American citizens. So that's a part of what we're trying to do in our bill, is make it better and do what we can to be more effective and get the latest best practices for our citizens. Because again, 1 in 4 are affected. We're spending $125 billion. How can we, and it's the way we've done business for a lot of years, our bill will help change that in terms of moving forward and make it much more efficient and better, and get those dollars to where they need to be in terms of health care.
And I think that's an important thing. As you mentioned, 1 in 4 people have some kind of mental issue that needs the care and attention. But if it's not being done in an efficient and effective manner, then those dollars and those resources are just kind of going to waste.
Yeah, it's about mental health, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it, but the reality of it is everybody's got a family member or a friend or someone that has a challenge, maybe within a year or maybe multiple years. But the idea is to get them more help, and I'm going to do what I can to make sure that happens.
Well, healthcare in general is still a major issue throughout the state, throughout the region, and throughout the country. How would you assess the implementation of the Affordable Health Care Act? And has it made healthcare more affordable? And how do we make it more affordable if it's not? What's your take on that?
Well, it's the ACA, Obamacare, whatever you want to call it, but Affordable Care Act. The problem is it's not affordable. I would support it. I don't support it for one gigantic reason, one big reason. The cost of health care is not going down. We need to bend the curve on health care. It continues to go up. I just talked to a lot of small business people and individuals, and their cost goes up on the average of 20% a year, and the cost of inflation or whatever is 2 or 3%. So the goal is, and let's find a way we can bring down the cost. I was in Bradenton the other day. One lady stood up and said that she's got 6 or 7 employees, but for her and her husband and her children, $2,000 a month. It's not unusual. If you're between 50 and 65, you could be spending $2,000 a month. People don't have that money. It's outrageous. Even if the employer is picking up 75% of it. The employee's still paying $500 a month. Mm-hmm. I had one young guy said, I'm not spending $700 a month for health care. He said, it's either give up my bass boat or my health care. But the bottom line is we've got to drive the cost down. I think it's way overpriced. And I've seen that as an employer myself and in talking with a lot of people over the years. It used to be everybody could get health care for a family, $300-400. Now, for small business, for a quality health care, it's $1,500, $1,200 to $2,000 per month. That's outrageous. It's a price of a house payment. So we need to find a way to drive the cost down. And that's why I think Obamacare, if you get the subsidies, it probably works for you. But there's a lot of people that don't get the subsidies.
Exactly.
A lot of small businesses that don't get the subsidies don't qualify, and as a result, the cost is through the roof. And that's why a lot of employers don't hire employees. They're trying to automate or more computers because the cost to hire an employee, where it used to be $30,000 plus 20% for benefits and matching FICA and everything else, now it's $30,000 plus 40%.
Right.
And people are saying, hey, I'm fine. I want to find a way to automate more because of the cost of an employee. And the main cost in that is health care.
Right. And I recently heard too, or read that some employers are looking at the fact that by reducing the number of hours that employees work, then they don't have to necessarily provide the health care. So you're looking at that as like, if somebody's working 30, 40 hours and they're reduced to 20 hours, that's a serious economic impact for that individual.
Well, one of the restaurant guys, I don't think you'd mind mentioning his name, but has 3 restaurants of 300 employees, 250, John Horn, who you probably know, John. But, under the Obamacare, what they're doing is they're saying if you work 40 hours, you've got to provide health care, but if you work under 30, 29 hours, then you don't have to provide it. Well, a lot of small businesses, they can't afford health care. They don't have a business that generates enough profit where they can afford to pay the health care. So they're moving a lot of people from 40-hour work week, they need the money, to 29. And that makes no sense. So again, I'm co-sponsoring a bill to change that. They're trying to change the new work week from 40 to 29 hours. So it's not only do they not have health care, but now they got to check with 25, 30% less pay per week.
Exactly. And that's, it's a severe impact as you kind of recover from an economy and, jobs or, unemployment comes to go down. You don't want, people to not only be without the paycheck, but without any kind of coverage. But let's change gears again, if we may. And I want to talk to you as the only Florida member on the House Ways and Means Committee, which is a powerful committee, significant responsibilities. And that deals with both taxes and trade. And this is a 2-part question. First of all, what, if any, do you see about tax reform? Do you see any things on the horizon that you are optimistic about?
Let me come back to the tax reform in 1 second. It does with tax, trade, but it oversees Social Security and Medicare.
It's a wide-ranging committee.
That's the reason it gives so much clout and jurisdiction. So let me just say, Social Security and Medicare, and I'm the only member on the committee in Florida, my main focus, they're both great programs, is make sure they're viable long term.
Exactly.
Because, with the boomers coming up and running the deficits we are, we've got to make sure that it works long term, because who can get health care at 65? So that's my main focus, is to make sure the people have paid into those, make sure they're viable. In terms of tax reform, we've been working on that for 3 years. And it looks like it'll get pushed, unfortunately, the next year. We haven't had tax reform in a material way since the late 80s. So we need to address it and deal with it. The tax code's 73,000 pages. Our goal is to make it flatter, fair, and simpler for people, because the amount of money that goes into doing your taxes, it'd be nice. We're looking at, I think, taking from 7 brackets down to 2 or 3. And get rid of a lot of the big corporate loopholes and special interest loopholes, even for big oil and other things, and lower the overall effective rate. So that's our goal.
Well, and those are very long-term type of things, and I think during your terms in office, you've been a strong advocate from the very beginning about tax reform. So it's kind of an uphill battle sometimes. Would you say that's fair?
Well, it just takes time to get things done, but we've had some good wins. Lately we've got the money for citrus, the beach renourishment here. The whole thing on flood insurance we haven't had a chance to touch base. We got that resolved on a bipartisan basis out of Florida. So we've got some wins done, but some things like tax reform are very complicated. You're talking about international taxation and a lot of other things and bringing money back on shore and everything. So there's a lot of aspects to it and a lot of special interests. So you've got to find a way that we can get it done and make sure it gets done right.
Well, if I may, I want to talk to you a little bit about the aspect about your responsibility on the House Ways and Means Committee, because your efforts to help pass the Trans-Pacific trade agreement. And am I correct in assuming that you were actually in the Pacific as part of that trade agreement? Didn't you go for a visit out to the...
Yeah, we were in Tokyo. That's something we're working on. I think it's 1 in 5 jobs in Florida. Is a result of international trade. 95% of the marketplace is outside the U.S. So we have to help our small and medium-sized businesses not only do business here, but look at the marketplace outside, not just Florida, but people think about Alabama. No, the world has become much smaller. So in terms of trade, even the president has mentioned that he'd like to find a way to grow exports, and so that's part of my job. But that being said, we've got to make sure, I'm open to free trade, but it's got to be fair trade. It's got to be good for our businesses and our jobs here. And, as a kid that grew up in the Midwest in a blue-collar family, I've seen the devastation, in a lot of it in the Midwest. We've got to make sure in our trade agreements that we fight for something that is not just fair to the people we're doing the trade agreements with, but are fair to our workers and our companies here, and finding ways to create incentives to keep our jobs here.
And that's a huge thing, and we hope that the continued growth and development of Port Manatee can add to those type of opportunities. Congressman, we're kind of winding down a little bit, and I want to give you a couple of moments to kind of reflect on the big issues that you have coming up and those things that you're most proud of that you've accomplished so far. So I would say to you that along with finding the money for the citrus greening and the beach renourishment are major accomplishments for Manatee and Sarasota County and for the entire state of Florida. I think those are critical things that all Floridians should be very, very appreciative of. But what do you see, what's your next steps? What do you see as you go back up on the Hill, and what do you see that are the major challenges that you'd like to see overcome?
Well, we touched on a little bit flood insurance. We've got some immediate relief. We've got some long-term relief to it in terms of flood insurance, but there's more that needs to be done. Because what was happening basically with a lot of our homes, people couldn't sell them or couldn't buy them. It was a big time problem. Insurance going from $400 to $4,000. So I think we've addressed it in the interim, but we need a more viable long-term fix. So that's going to be something I work on. We touched on the whole thing about tax reform. We'd like to simplify the code, lower taxes, flatter, lower taxes. That'll be another aspect. And then obviously we're going to do everything we can to fix this mess with the veterans issue. It'll be one of my top priorities. We're going to hold a conference here in the next week or so with all the members, Democrats and Republicans, because we have 2 million veterans in Florida. I co-chair the Florida delegation. So those would be some of the things. And then again, we want to find out about Gitmo and the idea of releasing terrorists. That's something we're going to be dealing with in the next 30 days, I'm sure. Somewhat in a very aggressive way. And then I think the big thing is we still, one of the biggest jobs is make sure that we're focused on jobs, and anybody needs a job can get a job. And then the viability of Medicare and Social Security long term, make sure that we make some tweaks and adjustments that improves what we've got in place today.
Well, if I must say, about the flood insurance, when that issue came up, you were very proactive in doing a series of town hall meetings with residents and concerned citizens specifically about that. You really took the bull by the horns and said there is something to be done, and the short-term fix is obviously there, and it's good to see that you're going to continue to work on that, because that's a major concern for this entire area.
Yeah, well, you can't, flood insurance affects almost everybody in Manatee County one way or the other, especially all these properties that we're talking about. And they're looking at up to 1,000% increases. So we had a good win, but again, it's not perfect and we need to make it better.
Well, you certainly have your work cut out for you, sir, and as you return to Congress. There's a lot of issues that obviously your leadership and insight into is going to help not only this area but the state of Florida as well. We welcome you back to come and give us regular updates on that, and we welcome you to come back and talk about, you know, the veterans issues, which I know are very, very important to you, and also any of the economic incentives that you see in the future. So, Congressman, thank you again for joining us, and I do appreciate you taking the time from what I know is a very busy schedule.
Well, thanks, Charles. And I just say again to all your viewers, I tell people I'm humbled to be a congressman, humbled to serve the people here in Manatee and Sarasota County. But at the end of the day, I'm a representative. If they can get more involved in my website in terms of giving us their thoughts and feedback, I can better represent them in Washington. And again, thank you, Charles, for this opportunity.
And thank you, Congressman. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Congressional Report.